Are you interested in learning how to build commercial roofs? Eric Gonzalez here with Regis Commercial Roofing. Today we're out here training our team so that they can keep expanding their knowledge on how to build and how to order commercial roofs. We're excited to be helping this property owner as we're going to be giving them a better roof. What a better way than to work for a better cost and not only improve these people's properties, but improving our lives at the same time. The drains are covered right now. I'm going to show them to you all, but so that way, whatever doesn't make it to the drains, it still falls off, to the back. So let's move over here so I can show y'all, the details and stuff. So right here, we have the wall, and whenever you're doing a wall, you always want to make y'all see how they roll the TPO over. You always want to make sure you roll it over a couple inches. You always want to make sure you roll it a couple inches because what's missing here is going to be the coping cap. The coping cap is going to come up on here. So anytime they're doing this, you always want to make sure they at least do it 6 inches over. Why? For the safety of the job. So a wind doesn't come and blows it. One of the things you always want to do when you're doing these commercial projects is, it's flat. Compared to a roof, if you're doing a roof and it's felted and the rain comes by, really nothing's going to happen. Why? Because the water comes down the side. But on this flat roof, water if water hits it, water's not going nowhere. Once again, because it's flat. So one of the things that is very important whenever you're doing these commercial roofs is that you always make sure that every day only what can be covered, gets taken off. If more than that gets taken off, then it's dangerous. And usually when you're doing commercial roofs, you just never know the weather. So right here we have the wall. What we're doing here is we're running the TPO. And then we're running up another piece. So it's always very important to reinforce all the walls. Why? Because on the walls, on the edges is where this building catches wind. So what we did different right here to reinforce all of the roof is we added a 5 foot perimeter. So whenever you have a commercial roof, you have rolls that are 5 by 100, 5 feet by 100 feet long. You have 10 by 100. You have 12 by 100, and you also have some 6s. So what we did on here is we did a separate piece of TPO to do the wall. Then we went ahead and put a 5 foot perimeter. A 5 foot perimeter. If this building, wasn't so easy to pick up by wind, then you wouldn't see this sheet right here. It probably would just be straight like that. But we added this to reinforce it, and then we gave the wall its own piece to reinforce it as well.
So wind won't get caught under none of that.
So now the whole edge is much stronger. Then if I didn't leave this piece, then this piece was just going to be running to the end. But now with this, it's much stronger because if you see it has like double reinforcement. It has the wall, then it has a perimeter, and then we go out into the field.
Plus you promote fasteners from the perimeter too.
So yeah, we're going to be going over that too. So as I've been telling some of the team, whenever you're doing this, you're going to start off with eight screws on all the boards on center, and as you get closer to the edges, it grows. So we're going to go from 8, 16, 24 to 32. The edges are going to have 32 screws and 32 plates all around the perimeter. Why? Because you want to reinforce the perimeter, and we're going to be looking at how some of the screws go. So, and one of the other things to mention is you obviously have the safety. You always want to put the safety 2 to 3 feet from the edge. Technically, whenever you're working on these walls and all this stuff, the crew members, they need to be tied off. So if they're working outside the flagging, they should be tied off, from the back with the anchor or whatever is available. So you always want to make sure you set up your flagging all the way. Right here we have one of the pipes. Obviously right now this is just temporary. So since they haven't done all the detail work on here, they just put silicone. But one of the things that is very important, like I said, whenever you're doing these commercial roofs, it's very important that at the end of every day, whoever's the production manager or if you're the project manager, that you come up here and you make sure that all those things are sealed. All those things are sealed because flat roof, water has nowhere to go. It's going to go, right in. The other important thing to remember too is, whenever they're doing these roofs, everything can seem covered, but you need to make sure that everything is welded, because if it's not welded, it doesn't matter. Water's still going to get in. And so one of the things that's very important to remember is when you have a project, if you leave it uncovered and the water gets in down below the insulation, you might have to change that insulation that you already installed new. Why? Because it's going to catch that moisture. it's going to catch that moisture, and what that moisture is going to cause for the roof to rise. So one of the other things right here are whenever these roofs, all these details right here, all these details. So once again, all this is temporary, but all these little edges and stuff like that, is very important that we pay attention. We pay attention to it. The other thing I want to mention too is that whenever you're doing these, it's important for you to calculate enough rolls, and it's always better to have whole rolls. If you see up there, you see how those are whole rolls, and then right here you can see that some pieces were used. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
You see how there's a piece right there?
Right there. Yeah.
You see? So one of the things you got to remember is the more seams that a commercial roof has, the easier it is for it to leak.
Gotcha.
So you always want to have the least seams as possible and throw the most whole rolls as possible. Gotcha. You see what I'm saying? Because like right there, we probably could have had that end somewhere over here towards the end, but it ended up right there in the middle. But it's important to remember that the less seams we have, the better.
Okay.
So this is what you use to probe the roof. So at the end of the day, once let's say the crew gets their progress done or whatever they're doing, and you want to make sure that everything's welded, you would have one of these hooks, and usually this is a hand one, but usually there's better ones where it's just a pole, and what you do is you're going to run it around here, and this is going to tell you if it's welded or not. If this can get under there, that means it's not welded properly. So right here, we got a good weld. It's not getting under there. But if you're able to put it in there, that means it's not welded properly. And whenever, like I said, it's very important with these roofs. So even though you'll have a production manager, even though you'll have the crew, you as a project manager, you always want to make sure that everything is welded right, because once again, it's your project. You're 100% responsible for it.
For sure.
So let's move over here. One of the things about these commercial roofs that you always got to pay attention to is that a lot of times they have all this extra stuff that's not needed. So if you can eliminate some of it, then it's going to be great. So you always got to ask the building owners whenever the project is being done. Find out if these are connected to anything, because if they're not connected to anything, you leave them on the roof, you just have an extra thing to do detail work on. You just have an extra possibility of a leak. So right here we have the drains over here. They're covered, but so basically what this roof does, it drains to the back. So there's another drain right there. One of the things that it's important to know is that the drains are covered right now, because whenever you do a commercial roof, you're gonna have a plumber out here. The plumber has to come off and take off the drains. And so since right now the drains are not connected, if you leave the drains open, what's gonna happen is the water's gonna go in there, but instead of going out, it's just all gonna go in the building. One of the biggest mistakes that happens on commercial roofs is the drains. People forget the drains. People forget that the drains are disconnected, all that type of stuff.
What happens when you run into air pockets like this?
So some of these air pockets are natural. Why? Because what happens to the building with heat and stuff?
That's on moisture, right?
No. So the buildings expand and contract.
So that will release stocks.
So it'll help the roof not, as the building contracts and expand, this will contract and expand with it as well. Yeah. Right here we have the plates and the screws, and we'll be going over them a little bit more. If we come right here to this edge, so this whole building had this elevated all the way. And so we're taking it off, because what would happen is the building drains, it would hit the drains right here, and the water would hit back and just come back into the drains. But the roof's not draining properly, so we're taking off the whole wall, and instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding a gutter. I'm going to be adding a gutter, because if y'all look over here, if you don't add a gutter, then all this water is just going to hit the wall, and eventually it's going to mess up the wall. So right here we have the transition between the insulation and the other, you see the other roof. Right here you can see the difference between the insulation and the fiberboard. and we got obviously we got the plates. So when it comes to commercial roofing, we have two different type of plates. You have the insulation plates, and then you have the membrane plates. So you see the difference?
Yeah.
The insulation plates are bigger. The membrane plates are called piranha plates, and what they have is they have these things. These things have hooks at the bottom that will hook onto the TPO.
Okay.
So
These hooks down here.
yeah,
Will hook onto the TPO.
and I'll show y'all the difference on the plates right now.
Look like staples.
These are called piranha plates.
Piranha plates. So you see, you put this down, and they have teeth like attached to it.
And these are called bar plates. They're flat. Yeah, they're
So
flat.
one of the things to mention when it comes to TPO, there's two types of roofs you could do. You have mechanically fastened and fully adhered. So mechanically fastened is you're only going to be putting down everything with screws and plates. Fully adhered means you're going to be using screws, plates, and glue. So this case, this one's mechanically adhered. But if it was, mechanically attached. But if it was fully adhered, what we'd be doing is you put your boards down, you put your plates, and what you do is once you put your boards and your plates, you would usually the glue comes in buckets, or you can spray it. You would spray the glue. You would spray it all over. You would let it rest 5 to 10 minutes. You have to let it rest 5 to 10 minutes, and then what you do is your TPO roll. You have to do the same thing. You would have your roll. You would spray your roll. You would measure. You would measure what you're gonna drop. You would spray it, leave it 5 minutes, and then you can drop it. 5 to 10 minutes, and then you can drop it. And then you would drop it on there. And so right here, as you can see, one side of the roof connects with the other one. So once we connect it here, you're gonna have the other roof fall up on here. Yeah. So let me tell you one of the things though that's very important is, if you're gonna have the other roll, we're gonna have to see what we're gonna do here, because you can't bring this other piece over. You have to put it under. Why? Because the water's gonna hit. If you come and put the piece over here, it's gonna continue to flow. You have to see, where the water is draining, or how is it gonna drain, because if we put the other one over, the water's gonna be hitting it. So once again, you don't want the seams to be getting hit with water and stuff like that. The easier that the roof can drain, the better. Because what happens is over time, if the water keeps hitting these seams, it's gonna come unwelded, just like anything else. Water's tricky, and then it'll eventually beat it. It'll eventually be, if you put any, like some doors have like plastics on the door and stuff like that. Eventually, it'll wear out with the heat and all that type of stuff. So over here we got the boards. So look, this is a welding gun. So this is a welding gun. Now, this gun, they only use it for details. They only use it like for the sides, the edges, and stuff like that. Whenever to weld here, they have a big robot that they use, and they use the generator to power it. This should not be used on the field. It should only be used in areas where you can't get it. If you ever see somebody using, this on the field, what happens is if you use this, it's gonna weld, but after a while, it'll come off. Why? Because this does not weld at a good enough heat. It has its temperature. Yeah.
For like big parts.
Yeah.
Like little details.
For details and stuff. The TPO has to weld at a certain temperature for that to happen. These right here, we call them witches hats, and these are the ones that go on some of the pipes. On your regular residential roofs, you have your 3x1 flashings that you use. Right here, you're gonna use these instead.
What's the measurement on this?
And all of these go welded. So these can actually be custom. These actually can be custom made.
So you just cut up as big open. So that has all those measurements.
So yeah, so you're basically gonna be cutting it, and this as well gets welded. This as well gets welded. They cut it depending on what they're gonna need. So one of the things we haven't talked about is whenever you're gonna be doing your welds, there's a special membrane cleaner, and is that bucket over there? See that bucket over there?
Yeah.
So whenever you're gonna do your welds, you gotta make sure that the area you're gonna be welding, you use the rags with the cleaner to clean it. You basically gotta prime it before you weld it. Once again, if you weld dirty TPO, it's not gonna weld right. Why? Because the dust stayed in there, and over time, it's gonna open up. It's gonna open up faster.
That dust didn't let it stick on.
Yeah. So the other thing I didn't mention is whenever you're gonna go inspect the TPO roof, you should take a probe hook. You need a probe hook because that's how you're gonna be able to figure out the leaks. If you don't have a probe hook, then you're just looking and you have to go, everywhere. So that's when we use the rags. Whenever you're gonna weld, whenever you're gonna do all the details and stuff. So whenever we weld this is all gonna get cleaned up with the rag and the membrane cleaner, and it's gonna be 100% clean. It's gonna be 100% clean, and then you can do the weld. It has to be a clean weld. If you don't do a clean weld, then it's not done properly. And so, once again, we got the seams are some of the most important things. If you ever go to a commercial property and it's leaking, head straight to the seams or head straight to some of the the details where the pipes are at and all that type of stuff. The other thing that happens a lot with these roofs is other people come like fix ACs and stuff like that. They don't know how to step on the roof, and one of their tools falls or something, it'll poke a hole. And that's what will make the leak. So you got to be very careful with all your tools and stuff. If you're doing the repair, if you're doing the maintenance, whenever you're walking on it, because you yourself could be messing up the roof, the shoes, all that, all that type of stuff. What else you want to add, Danny?
The witch's hat. Just tell them what they call.
So the other thing I need to mention to y'all is whenever you're ordering, your screws, you got to make sure your screws are big enough to fit everything. So these screws, they go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 inches, depending on how deep the roof is and how deep you're going to need to go. So in this case, we're using 3-inch and 3.5. Why? Because the insulation is 1.5 and the membrane is less than half. So it's perfect. So it fits because you're working with about 2. You also got to realize that this screw doesn't go all the way up. It only goes up to a certain. So what do you have right here? Like 2 inches that are from the screw that are not being used. So we got to be sure that it's able to go through everything and then hit the deck. So you see right there, that one, when you put it down, this much is going to end up on the underside of the deck, and that's good. That's good.
Does it penetrate the deck?
That's good. Yeah, it penetrates the deck.
You already covered the overlap, 6-inch overlap. Yeah.
So one of the other things too, whenever you're installing these, they're doing them about a foot. Everything has to go about a foot. So a foot, all the plates. And the same thing right here. Right here you can't see it because they're already covered, but they're about a foot. A foot, all the way.
You bring your TPO overlap, same thing. Has to be like 6 inches overlap.
And so, for example, on these boards right here, we're putting 8 plates, and the way that they arrange the plates is they arrange them in a diamond manner. You see, they put one right here, one right here. They have one right here. They probably have one over here. So you can't see it all the way. One of the things that I always say is, unless there's a manufacturer specific, I always like to put. So if I'm putting 8 plates on, we don't have a board over there. If I'm putting eight plates on this board, let me bring it to you all. So these are not the correct ones, but I'm just going to use them for demonstration. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how a board on center would be screwed. And the reason I like to put my plates like that is, in the future, I don't want the board raising up from the edges. Because, like you said, the roof catches moisture and all that type of stuff. So we've had times where, they'll put them more like on center, stuff like that. And then it'll raise up from the sides where they meet. So, that's usually how we go ahead and put them.
Tell them about the electric conduits and how you put the pitch pockets
in
and all that.
So one of the other things that I want to talk to you about is on the walls. We're using this board. On the walls, we're using a different kind of board. You don't put insulation on the walls. You don't put insulation on the walls, but we're using a different. This board, this is called like this is actually a fiber board, and it's much smaller, and we're just putting it on the walls so that the walls can stick right. Because for example, if we don't put anything, if we don't put no board on the walls, how are you going to screw?
On this side of the wall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There?
If you don't put if you don't put anything on the wall, how are you going to screw in the wall? How are you going to glue it?
Exactly.
So you got to put just something. You know, this is like a point. I think this is like 0.5, and we're just putting it on there.
It's called cover board.
Yeah, cover board. So you know, as y'all can see right here, these are not complete. We're going to drop the. Which can you pass me that one? We basically be dropping it on there, and then you know they're gonna do the cut. So I think on this one they'll probably be going all the way to the bottom.
Just weld that down, right?
Yeah, and so once they weld this down, if you notice, if it goes all the way down, it's gonna cover this. This is just a temporary patch.
Yeah.
It's gonna cover it, and then what we're gonna have to do is we're still gonna have to do detail work on top of it. So one of the things is the more penetrations a commercial roof has, the more you have to charge. The more penetration it has, the more difficult it is to build, because this is all detail work. There's more danger of it leaking. There's more danger of you having to come back in the future, all that type of stuff. Like for example, that roof right there, that roof's a mess.
So this is a penetration. That's a penetration. What else? All that's penetration stuff.
Yeah, all that's penetration. So the more penetration there's on a commercial roof, you know, the more risk you have, the more they have to pay, because all this detail work is going to take the crew a lot more time to get the work done.
Yeah. You got to make all those penetrations leak proof.
And so the reason why this is important is because a lot of the things that happen in commercial is most of the commercial roofs you're going to come across are retail. You know, are retail. And so whenever you're doing retail, you got to consider adding all that on top to your bid. And so the reason why most of your projects are retail is because, you know, usually you know, you get commercial roofs, but they weren't necessarily gone through a storm. It's just like a new owner, or a lot of times on these commercial roofs, the building and the roof is just too old and it just needs to be new. You know, or you have commercial property investors buying new properties that they need to put new roofs on that they got discounts for, all that type of stuff. So a lot of your commercial work is going to be retail. You know, you could get commercial work on an area where there was you know, a storm or stuff like that, but a lot of times what happens is a lot of these building owners, they don't live here. They live in other states. They live in other countries and stuff, so they don't even become aware. They never file a claim. 3-4 years later, they need a new roof. They can't put it through the claim. Now it's retail. Because remember, insurance gives you two years to claim a commercial property.